On behalf of the Languages and Literature Department at Virginia State University, I want to welcome each and every one of you tonight, and thank you so much for coming. The 2023-2024 Lena Whitt Lecture Committee had two goals, and one of them was to break down what was traditionally called the town gown barrier. That's why we brought this talk to the Petersburg Library, so that the campus and the community could mingle. The other goal that we had was to find a writer whose writing was so dynamic that it appealed to people across every demographic that we could think of. And I know you know this when I say that that ranges from former President Barack Obama to horror master Stephen King. So in an age when people are saying that humanities skills are less desirable and less necessary, we say no. We say that writing skills and communication skills are what build community. And speaking of that, I do need to interrupt myself and say thanks to the guys who brought their cars today, right? That is a central feature of this community, and the 1950s Bel Air. That's from Rock Bates' garage, and he has worked at that garage right behind campus for 66 years, since he was 9 years old. So we thank those gentlemen. But what I wanted to close with as I introduce the speaker is that I would actually argue that writing is a superpower that allows us to reflect on our past, look at our present, and build our future. So I introduce you to our superhero, S.A. Cosby, and I ask you to join me in welcoming him.
Thank y'all for being here. I appreciate it so much. I'm sorry I'm late, but anybody from the area know how 64 can be. So, yeah, exactly. Even superpowers can't get you around that traffic. I wanted to say thank you to Virginia State University for putting this together and having me here. It is an honor to speak at a HBCU. I've had the opportunity to speak at a lot of colleges, and it means a lot to me to be able to speak here for you folks today. It's very important that everyone pursue their dream if they want to be a writer, but it's most important that writers, black writers, writers of color, are here to present and show to aspiring black writers that it can be done. It's difficult, it's not easy, but it's possible. And so I thought I would just tell you folks a little bit about myself, how I got started writing, how I got my career, how I ended up on President Barack Obama's summer reading list, which I thought that was a joke. I didn't think it would have somebody, because I thought somebody was playing a joke on me. I didn't believe it. And so when you get on the summer reading list, he sends you a little card, a little handwritten note. Yeah. And I thought it was one of my friends playing a joke on me. And so I went to the mailbox, and they sent it, and it comes in this giant FedEx box. But it's a little card, and you open it up, and it says from the president, former office of former President Barack Obama. And I called one of my friends, and I said, man, did you send me something that, like, did you go to Kinko's and make this up? And he got real quiet. And he was like, no, I didn't do that. And then he paused, and he's like, open it. And it's funny because I was thinking, how do you get my address? But then he's former president, so I'm sure he had no problem. He just made a call. He's like, I need his address. So how did I get started writing? So I was born in a little small town called Matthews County, Virginia. And it's the smallest county in Virginia, about 8,000 people. I know all of them, related to half of them. So I mean, when you meet a girl, you gotta go out of town, because every time I met a girl, I come home and tell my mama, and it's like, what's her name? What's the people name? Oh, you related to her, that's your cousin. Are you sure? Really? Because she got real pretty eyes. No, that's your cousin. All right. So I was born to my mother, Joyce A. Cosby, and my father, Royal Eldon Cosby. And I like to say that our early days were somewhat like a bad blues song, because before I was 4 years old, our house burned down, and my parents separated. My mom got sick. We had to move in with my grandparents. And my grandparents had a big farmhouse out in Matthews. And my grandfather raised pigs and grew collard greens and stuff like that, and hunted and fished. And so I grew up doing all of that, but also was surrounded by books as a child. So my grandmother read romance novels, and she used to read this magazine called True Story. Okay, yeah. So True Story was like Young and the Restless, but in a magazine. And so, and if you're a Southerner of a certain age, your grandmama and Victor Newman helped raise you. And so my grandmother read romance novels. My aunt, who lived next door, she read horror novels. And my uncle, who lived upstairs in the house, he read detective novels. And my mother read historical novels and biographies. So I was always surrounded by reading. And my mother didn't want me to read my grandmama's romance novels because she thought they were a little too risque for me. But I didn't understand half the words in them anyway, so I had to go run into the dictionary and look up, oh, that's what tumescent mean, okay. And so, see, y'all know. And my uncle read detective novels, and my mom, again, was concerned because he would read detective novels, and they had very sort of salacious covers, so my mom would make him cut the covers off before he give them to me, which I know she meant well, but the book still had all the nasty stuff in it. So, I mean, she was trying. And my aunt used to read horror novels, and one of the books that she used to read all the time was Stephen King books. And I remember when I was 12, I read my first Stephen King novel, and she gave it to me. She said, look, are you gonna be able to read this and not get scared? Because I don't want your mama mad at me. I was like, I'll be fine, no problem. I read that book, and then I made a popsicle stick crucifix and slept with it underneath my pillow for 2 weeks after reading that book. It scared the mess out of me. I was terrified. I thought Ralphie Glick gonna come to my window and come in, and so my mom found out about it. She got upset about that, but she was never upset at me about reading. She wanted me to read what she considered proper books, which I did. She used to make us read historical novels and books about Greek mythology and books about African kings. So, I was 13 and 14 reading about Hannibal and reading about the Ashanti Empire and the Khufu. And my mom, she was very much about us being educated. So she used to make us solve riddles if we wanted money. And we didn't get an allowance. We were very poor. My mom couldn't work. She was disabled. For a little while, she worked as a teacher's aide, and then she had to stop. And then my dad, him and my mom separated. He was a fisherman, so he was gone a lot. But whenever we did want money, we had a little extra change. My mom would make us solve a riddle. And I remember my brother was 15, and he said, I'm going to get a job because I can't solve these riddles. He's like, they're making my head hurt. You the smart one. You keep solving them. I'm going to go to work. And so I was always surrounded by knowledge and reading. I had a big family. My father had 11 brothers and sisters. So I have a lot of first cousins. And all my uncles and aunts were just incredible characters. I was so lucky to be surrounded by these people who were incredible storytellers, incredible comedians. My uncle Richard would tell you, if he's telling you a story and you'd ask him if it's true, he said, well, it might not be true, but it should be. And so I was surrounded by this tradition of storytelling. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my mom used to read me bedtime stories. She would read me stories, and she's not with us anymore. She's passed away, but she used to tell people that even at 6, 7, 8 years old, I would complain about the bedtime stories because they didn't make sense. So I was complaining about the plot in the stories. So I remember she used to tell people that I would complain about the 3 little pigs because they built their first house out of straw and their second house out of sticks and the third house out of bricks. And my mom said I would tell her all the time, why didn't they build all the houses out of bricks? Why didn't they just start with that? And so I think she got aggravated. So one day she said, well, you know what? Write your own story. And you can do whatever you want. You ain't got to worry about complaining about it making sense. So I wrote this story. We used to have a big magnolia tree in our backyard. And I wrote this story about these gnomes, these little elves that lived in the magnolia tree, like the Keebler elves. And it's a terrible story. It's awful. But I remember I let her read it. And she kept looking at the story, and she kept looking at me, and she kept looking at the story, and she kept looking at me. And finally, at the end of it, she said, you wrote this all by yourself? And I was like, yes, ma'am. She said, nobody helped you? I said, no, ma'am. And she was like, this is really good. It wasn't really good. That's your mama telling you. Your mama gonna tell you that. But I remember the look on her face when she was reading it and how she sort of came to this realization that I had created this all by myself and nobody helped me. And I swear, I think I'm chasing that look to this day. When I see readers that come up and they've read the books, I want to see that same look on their face. And so I decided about 8, 9 years old, I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what that meant. And my mother was so concerned about that. Even like when I first told her at 9 years old I wanted to be a writer, and she was like, "Well, you know, you gotta have a real job because writers don't make any money." And so I got older, and when I was in high school, in the 11th grade, so I used to get in trouble in school because I would write stories about the teachers and pass them around to my friends. And we had a teacher, he had terrible breath. I swear to God, yes, I'm sorry, it's the truth. It's like one time, I wrote a story about how bad his breath was, and he confiscated it. He's like, "I'm gonna call your mother." I said, "I tell you what, lick a stamp and send it to her, because she'll see I'm telling the truth." And I got in trouble, and I was sent to the office. And so the next teacher that I had, he didn't have bad breath, but his name was Jeff Bone, and he was the first teacher to realize that I had he said I had a talent for writing. And one day I wrote another little crazy story, and he made me stay after class, and I thought I was gonna get in trouble, because I got in trouble before. And he said, "Do you like writing stories?" I was like, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Have you ever thought about doing it professionally?" And I said, "No, because my mama said you can't make no money at it." And he said, "Well, I think you should consider going to college for writing. You have a unique talent for this." And he gave me 2 books. They weren't on the regular syllabus. He gave me a book called The Elements of Style by Strunk and White. It's this little thin book, but it tells you it's the best writing instruction manual you'll ever get. And he gave me the collected works of William Shakespeare. And he said, the first book will teach you how to write, and the second one will teach you why you write. And so I did end up trying to go to college. I went for 2 years, but unfortunately my mother got more ill. She had a progressive disease and it made her sicker, so I had to drop out. I had to drop out of college. It was funny though, because I dropped out, but I liked going to college so much, I went for another month. I just snuck into class, and I went for like a month, and they never even noticed it. And then finally, the professor's name was Professor Polly. He kept me after class one day, and he's like, "You can't come back." I was like, "You're not on the list." And I'm like, "Okay." He said, "But look, don't stop writing, because you're really talented. I hope you can come back next semester." And so I ended up not going back, but I got a job. I was trying to take care of my mom, and we lived in this little single wide mobile home trailer. And I was running to Mr. Bone in town after I graduated from high school. And he would always ask me, "Are you still writing?" I was like, "I guess, I don't know." He's like, "Don't give up. Do not give up." And so years go by. I'm still writing, getting a lot of rejections. I've been writing so long. I remember when you had to send your story in with a self-addressed stamped envelope because you wanted to get it back. This is before email, so it's been a long time. I've been writing for a minute. And I sent a story in to a magazine, and it got rejected. But the editor sent me a handwritten note. And at the bottom of the rejection, it was like a form rejection letter they send you. But at the bottom, he said, "I'd love to see something else from you." He said, "You're really talented." And those little things just kept me going and kept me going. So fast forward, 10 years, and I'm still writing, haven't had much success. And my mother's getting sicker and sicker, and trying to take care of her. And eventually, I got a job at a hardware store, got a job at a Lowe's down home in a local place. And they were trying to get me to go into the store management training program, and it's a big commitment. It's like Lowe's College. And I was kind of concerned about that because I didn't really want to do that for the rest of my life. And a friend of mine, a friend of mine, she was a ballet dancer, and she went to New York City and did a performance. And while she was up there, after they did the performance, they went to a bar, and she met this guy, and his name was Todd Robinson, and he ran a magazine of crime fiction stories. When she came back, she said, "Hey, I know you're trying to get on with your writing, and I met this dude, and he pays for crime fiction stories." I thought, "How much he pay?" And she was like, $100. I was like, "I really need that $100. Like, I've been going to Coinstar for gas money. I need this $100. And so I wrote this story, a crime fiction story, called The Rat and the Cobra. And I sent it in, he published it. And he published a few more of my stories, paid me $100 for gas. And eventually, a gentleman reached out to him. He had read one of my stories. He was an agent. And he said, "I'd like to meet, this Mr. Cosby, S.A. Cosby, Sean." And we met online on the phone. And he signed me. And I was like, "Well, this is it. I'm on my way. I got an agent, And That's not how things work. And so after a year of him trying this, it was funny because I wrote a book, My Darkest Prayers, my first book, and we just got so many rejections, 63 rejections. Yeah. At one point, I told him to stop sending me the email. Like, just tell me. You ain't got to send it to me. I don't need to see it in print. And eventually, he dropped me. He said, "This isn't working out. I don't think that your particular skill set is marketable. So I'm gonna have to let you go." And I was like, "Okay, all right then, I guess." And I was still working, and I eventually went and was in Washington, D.C. at a reading event, something like this. And I met a gentleman there named Austin Camacho, who runs a little small publishing firm out of Maryland. And I was telling him about the book. And he's like, "You know what, I'll publish it." I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Do you want to know how much the advance is?" I was like, "What's an advance?" And he's like, "That's what we give you for taking your book." I said, "Oh yeah, how much is it?" And he was like, "It's $500. I was like, "Sold, let's go." And so he took the book and sold and was gonna publish it, and they were working on it and everything. And by this time I had met a young lady who became my wife Kimberly, Redmond Cosby. And I remember our first date. So first of all, she almost stood me up, because I waited. She was supposed to meet me at 3, and 3 come, and then 3:30, and then 3:45, and I kept texting her, "Where are you?" And she said, I'm coming. I'm like, "All right, I don't know, you don't seem like you are." And but when she did finally make it, we talked, and we talked till the coffee shop closed down. We talked at 8 o'clock, from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And one of the things I told her about myself, because we had been talking online, we had met online, I said, "I want to be a writer." She was the first woman I ever dated that didn't laugh at that or didn't make fun of it. She's like, "Well, I think you can do it." And I was like, "Oh, you might be a keeper," because it's like, and so eventually she owns her own business down our way. She owns a funeral home. And I was working at the hardware store still. And one day, man comes in the store, and we used to let service animals in, right? And he comes in with a monkey. He got a little monkey. Swear it's a true story. Little monkey in his basket. Monkey's wearing a little monkey diaper. And I was the manager on duty. I had to go up to him and I said, "Hey, sir, you can't bring the monkey in here." And he was like, "It's my emotional support monkey." And I was like, "Look, man, you can't have this monkey in here. I'm sorry." And he's like, "He's not gonna hurt anybody." The moment he said that, he grabbed that man's hand and bit his finger, and then took his little monkey diaper off and started throwing monkey poo all over the store. And of course, the man left, and I was with another manager, and we were cleaning it up. And I said, "I gotta do something different. I can't keep doing this. I can't live my life cleaning up monkey poo." And I came home, and I told her we were dating by this time. She's my girlfriend now. And I was just telling her about that. And she said, "You know what you should do?" I said, "What?" She's like, "You should quit that job and come work for me. And work with me. You'll have more time to write. You'll help me out. Because you're never going to write the books you want to write working there." I was working 67 hours a week. And about it, and I went to talk to my mother. And my mom was like, "I don't think you should do that." I was like, "Well, why not?" She's like, "Because she's going to leave you. Don't a woman want to support no man. She's not going to take care of you." And I was like, "Well, she the one came with the idea. It don't matter. You don't do it." I'm like, I said, "Mama, I think I'm going to do it. And she was like, "All right, well, just do it for 1 year." My mom was like, "Do it for 1 year. If you don't sell a book in that year, you go back to work. If you want to keep that woman, she's a good woman. She's not going to keep taking care of you." I was like, "Okay, thanks for the vote of confidence." And so I did. I quit my job. I told my store manager, and he said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to help." By this point, she's my fiance. I said, "I'm going to help my fiance, her business, but I'm going to try to write, full time." And my boss, he said, "Well, that doesn't really work out a lot. So just know you always have a place to come back here." And I thought to myself, I said to him, "Well, thank you, I appreciate it." But I said to myself, I would rather fill my hands with baby shit and clap than ever come back here. And so I go and I write another book while this other gentleman in D.C. was going to publish Darkest Prayer. I was sitting there and I was watching TV with Kim, and it was a PBS show that came on, and there's a musician, Bruce Springsteen, who was on this show. It's called American Masters. And he was talking about when he wrote his first successful album, Born to Run, he had written 2 other albums and they hadn't been successful. And he said something to the effect of, I knew the company was going to drop me, I had nothing to lose, so I decided I was gonna write an album about the things I liked, the things I want to talk about. And I turned to Kim, I said, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna write a book about the South, about being black in the South, about car culture, which I love, about growing up in a small town in Virginia, and let the chips fall where they may. So I wrote this book, and then sat there for a while. And then one day, Kim was reading the paper, and she said, hey, there's this big crime writing convention in Florida. You should go to that. And I was like, this is like week 48 of this year after I quit my job. And I said, well, I don't think we got enough money for that. It's a lot to register for the thing. You got to fly down there and all that kind of stuff. And then she's like, I think you should go. You need to make connections with people. You need to get into that world. And I said, we don't have the money for it. And I don't, I'm not going to spend that money. I don't want you spending good money after bad. What if I go all the way down there and nothing happens? And she said, well, what if you go down there and something do happen? And so we kind of argued about that back and forth. And about a week before the event, she came in the door, I was making dinner. I'll never forget it. She handed me an envelope. I said, what is this? And I thought it was a bill, because at that time, all we was getting was bills. And she said, open it. So I opened it, and inside it was the plane ticket and the hotel accommodations to go to Florida to this convention. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, you don't think you can make it, and you're afraid to take this chance, but I believe in you. And you're never gonna forgive yourself if you don't try. And I said, you need to go and refund this ticket so we can get this money back. And she's like, if you don't go, I'm going. So what you gonna do? I was like, I guess I'm going, shoot. And so I go down there, and it's all these famous mystery writers that I've grown up loving. Walter Mosley's there, and Dennis Lehane is there, and all these people that I've grown up admiring. And they're so nice. They're the nicest people in the world. They didn't know me from Adam. They were so nice to me. And I'm down there. I met, there's a guy named Lee Child who writes the Jack Reacher novels. Met him. He bought me a drink. He didn't know me. And I was like, oh, man, this is cool. I didn't even think about publishing a book. I was just happy to be there. This is great. And there was a panel about Southern crime fiction. And a buddy of mine was the moderator. And he said, look, I'm going to put you on this panel. I was like, man, you can't put, these people on this panel are established. They got books out. They're real writers. And I'll never forget it. He said, you're a real writer too. He said, you wrote a book, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I guess. I mean, whatever. And he was like, well, you're going to be on this panel. I'm like, all right. So I'm on the panel, and it was really a wonderful experience. All the other writers on there were so nice to me, and they didn't have to be. And, we were talking about the South and stuff. So at the end of the panel, there was a writer to my right, big old white boy named Ace Atkins, big tall dude, and really nice. He's become one of my best friends. And we're sitting there, and a woman gets up at the end of the panel, and she says, well, I don't really have a question, I have a comment. And Ace nudged me in the arm. He's like, here we go. And so this woman proceeds to say that she felt like we were being too hard on the South because, some periods of the South were wonderful. She loved the antebellum period. Yeah. And nobody said anything. And finally, my friend who's the moderator, he's like, Sean, would you like to respond to that? I was like, I would love to respond to that. And I said, ma'am, I mean, I love a bustle skirt as much as the next person, but, the antebellum period wasn't just bad for people. People that look at me got killed. They got lynched. They were slaves. And so she got mad and left. And I come out of that panel, and a gentleman comes up behind me, and he's like, excuse me. And I had a bag in my hand, because I had books in there I was going to get signed. And I turned around, and it was a little small white man, glasses. I thought it was her husband, right? So I dropped my bag, because, he's ready to eat for everybody. And he holds out his hand, and he said, my name is Josh Gessler. I'm a literary agent. He said, I love what you were talking about in there. I love the way you talk about fiction and the way you think about storytelling. He said, I also love how you handled that racist lady. He said, are you currently represented by anybody? I said, nope. I said, in fact, I got dropped a year ago by my agent. He said, well, here's my card. He gave me a card. When you get home, if you're working on something, send it to me. So I go home, and I tell Kim, and she said, well, you going to send in Blacktop Wasteland? I said, I don't know, man. It was like, maybe he's like that other agent. He just be jerking me around. I don't know. She said, well, it don't hurt to send him the book, And I was like, I don't know. She said, well, do you know anybody that works with him? Like maybe you can ask them, what's he like? And I knew this one guy, and I called him up. And I said, hey, man, you're Agent Josh Gessler. What do you think about it, man? Tell me, like, be real with me. He said, am I on speakerphone? And I said, no. And he said, this MF will change your life. He said, I swear to God, if he's interested in you, sign with him. I'm like, all right. So that was November of 2018. I signed with him in December of 2018. He sold Blacktop Wasteland in February of 2019. Sold it to Macmillan Publishing for a 2-book deal, and it changed our lives, changed everything for me. And it was funny because they didn't give me a big advance because I think they didn't have a lot of confidence in the book. And so I got this advance, and he was apologizing to me. He's like, man, it's not as much as I wanted, but it's a start. I said, this is half of what I make at Lowe's in a year, so this is fine. You ain't hurting my feelings at all. And so, which I learned later, the business side of publishing, sometimes it's good to get a small advance because you pay that back and everything after that is yours. So anyway, we get the book published, and I go to my mother, and I said, Mom, I got a book published. She said, how much money they giving you? And so I told her, and she said, well, that's not very much. Like, you supposed to live off that? I said, well, it's going to make sales. And my mom was like, well, what if it don't make a sale? I was like, hopefully it will. And then she was like, I don't know. You should probably put that money in the bank and go back to work. I'm like, I said, Mama, I think I'm going to do this full time. And she said, well, what did Kim say? I said, she's happy about it. Is she really? I'm going to talk to her. I'm like, you can trust me. I'm going to talk to her. So Kim had to convince her that she was okay with me writing full time. And so I got the, what you call the advance copies, I go back to my store manager, my boss back then, and I signed a copy of the book to him. And I said, to Mike, thank you for everything. I don't think I'm coming back. Best wishes, Sean. So the book comes out in June of 2020, and the first review is terrible. That dude hated my book. I mean, he acted like I had kicked his dog. He hated the book. And it was so funny because I know he was so proud of himself, the title he put on the review, because it's Blacktop Wasteland, it's about a getaway driver, it's about fast cars. And he was like, this automotive thriller not hitting on all cylinders. And I was like, oh, I'm sure your mama liked that. And so, but I was so devastated. And I remember I was at the house, I was laying on the couch, and then Kim came in. She was wrong, and I said, read this review. And she, well, is that the only review in the world? I said, well, no, there are other ones, but that's probably gonna be bad too. And she said, well, it doesn't matter if it was bad. You wrote a book, you finished it. A lot of people talk about doing it, you did it. So then the next review was really, yes, you can clap for that, because that's true. So the next review was really good. And then the review after that, Walter Mosley spoke about the book on his blog. And he said that American crime fiction has found a new voice, S.A. Cosby. And I was so excited because, other people had said nice things about the book, but it's like Walter Mosley. That's Walter Mosley talking about you. And so about 3 weeks after the book had been out, I got invited to do a Zoom, because, we're in the midst of COVID, and I got invited to do a Zoom with Walter Mosley and another writer, an indigenous writer named Stephen Graham Jones. And we're on the Zoom, and I was talking to Mr. Mosley, and I said, you probably don't remember this, but about 5 years ago, you came to William and Mary College in Virginia, and you did a lecture about how to write a book in a year, and I was there. And I had you sign a copy, and before I could finish saying it, he said, you had me sign a copy of Debbie Doesn't Do This Anymore. And I was like, you remember that? He said, yeah, I remember it. He said, because your name is Sean, and I tell you how I used to be friends with Sean Connery. And I couldn't believe he remembered that. And so ever since then, Walter's been like my friend. He's been my mentor. It's funny because I get text messages from him sometimes, and he starts every text message with, Sean is Walter. I'm like, I know. I got it saved in my phone. It's in all capital letters. It says Walter Mosley, star. And so he's become like a sort of mentor for me. He really has sort of helped guide my career. So anyway, the book's out for about 4 or 5 months. And my agent calls me one day, and he says, hey, we got your royalty check here. So I need your banking information. I'm gonna send it to you. And I said, why don't you just mail it? Just mail the check. And he said, no, I can't mail this. I need to send this to you. I need to send it through your bank. I don't want to give you my banking information. It's like, I don't want to give you my account number. I know you, but I don't know you like that. And He's like, Sean, I can't mail this. I don't want to trust this in the mail. I was like, how much is it? Because I didn't understand publishing. I didn't know how much it would be. When he told me the number, I was like, I'll come get it. Like, I will fly up there. And he said something to me, and he says it every once in a while. He's been my agent now for 6 years. He says, you are gonna eat off of this book for a long time. You are gonna be fine. So by this point, unfortunately, my mother has gotten more ill. She's in the hospice now, and I go to see her. And it was, COVID, so I couldn't go in the room. So I was at the window of her door, and they rolled her up to the window. And I said, how you doing? She said, I'm doing all right. And she said, I think this writing thing gonna work out for you. I was like, oh yeah, for real? Why you say that? And she was like, I was watching Today's Show this morning, and there was a bald-headed man on there talking about your book. He held it up and showed it on TV. I was like, yeah, that's Harlan Coben. He picked it as his summer read. And so my mama said, all right, how much they paying you? I said, did we doing all right? Don't worry about it. She's like, you can tell me. I ain't gonna tell nobody. I know you ain't gonna tell nobody. I said, just put it like this. I said, we're making enough that you ain't gotta worry about nothing ever again. And so she said, oh, okay. Well, how much is that? I said, and so I dedicated my first book to my father. And I wrote another book, Razorblade Tears. And when I finished that book, my mom was really sick. She was really sick. And they let me in because they were like, we don't know how much longer she has. So I go in there. She's very weak. And I dedicated that book to her. And I said, look, Mom, I dedicated this book to you. And she's very weak. She looks at it. She kind of rolls over and closed her eyes for a minute. And then she opened back up. And she said, you should have dedicated the first book to me, too. It's like, I'm the one who got you your first computer. And I was like, and so I told her, I said, well, I'll dedicate next one to you, too. She's like, no, you ain't got to do that. And then she kind of paused for a second. And she said, I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I think you're going to be all right. And I said, you ain't nothing going to happen to you, woman. You too tough. And she said, no, I think you're going to be okay. She said, I always knew you would do it. I said, yeah, you didn't act like that. And she said, I had to keep you on your toes, but I always knew you would do it. And so I'm glad that she got to see some of this happen. And my daddy, he don't read, but I went by his house one day, and one of the first things I did when I got my first royalty check, because my mom was in hospice, so I bought her like a giant bouquet of flowers, like 24 roses, and I sent them there. And I got me and my daddy matching recliners, because my daddy used to be a fisherman. He got real bad knees, and so I got us like the fanciest recliner I could find. Like, it's got a heater in there and a back massager, and it's got a little cooler on the side. So I took it to his house. I go by to see him like a week after they delivered it, and he still got the plastic on it. I was like, Daddy, why ain't you sitting in the chair? Well, I don't want to mess it up. It's paid for. Like, I got the receipt. It's all right. Sit in it, mess it up, relax. And he was, oh, I don't want to do that, boy. You ain't got to spend no money on me. I said, no, sit in the damn chair. So we sit in the chair, and we drank a little whiskey shot together. And I look on top of his TV on his entertainment center. He's got a big old entertainment center. And he's got all my books up there. And I know he's not a big reader at all. My dad don't read nothing. He might read a paper once in a while. And I look at the books, and I'm teasing him a little bit. I said, man, what you got them books up there for? You don't read. And he looks away, and he takes a shot of whiskey, and he kind of whispers to me. He said, yeah, but you wrote them. I had to run at that house, because I was going to bust into tears. And so that book comes out. The first book had done really well, Black Tie Wasteland, but that book really changed our lives. It was a New York Times bestseller. It debuted at number 9. They're making a movie out of it. And about 3 months after Razorblade Tears comes out, I get the notification that it was on Barack Obama's summer reading list. And I remember I was writing another book when I got that notification. And I had my phone on the desk. I was writing. I had a little bowl of Fruit Loops to the left because I love Fruit Loops. Because we were kids, we couldn't afford Fruit Loops. We used to get fruit rings. And let me tell you this, they are not the same. I don't care what nobody tell you. They don't even put it in a box. It's in a bag. It's like, here, eat this, you poor bastards. And so, I buy, my wife will tell you now, I buy Fruit Loops every chance I get. I love Fruit Loops. So I'm sitting there eating my Fruit Loops, I'm writing, I got the phone over here, and my phone starts vibrating. I look, and I'm getting all these notifications. I was like, am I getting canceled? What did I do? And so I finally, one of my friends calls me, and she was like, have you been online? Have you been on Twitter today? I was like, no, go on Twitter. I was like, what? Just go on there. I ain't gonna tell you. I was like, okay. And I go on there, and I look at it, and it's, President Barack Obama's, these are my summer reads. These are the books that I read over the summer I really enjoyed. And there was Razorblade Tears. And my mom had passed away by then, but I went down to the cemetery, and I went to her headstone, and I took a picture of the tweet, and I pasted it to the headstone, and it was, there are 3 women in my life I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for them. It's my mama, my wife, and my grandmama. And so I'm thankful to them because they all supported me. Even when I didn't act like I believed in myself, they always believed in me. And so that was just an incredible feeling. And then my next book, All Sins Bleed, he put that on his summer reading list too. So I was like, at this point, we should have dinner or something. We're like old friends now. And so the middle book is being made into a movie by Paramount Pictures and Jerry Bruckheimer Entertainment. It was funny because I got to do a meeting with them. It was like a Zoom meeting with them. And so it's the production people from Paramount is me, and then it's like Jerry Bruckheimer, right? So when you go in these meetings, when they want to purchase your book, when they want to get the rights to it, they tell you you're the best thing ever. They'll tell you your fart smell like cotton candy. They just lie all day long because they want the book. Yeah, and so finally, they're talking all this yin-yang. And Mr. Bruckheimer, he raises his hand. He's like, Sean, Jerry, nice to meet you. I was like, yeah, nice to meet you. I love Top Gun. And so he says, this has been wonderful talking with you. He says, but how much money is it going to take for us to be in business? What's your number? I didn't have a number because I didn't know he was going to ask that. And my agent had a family emergency, so he wasn't on the call. So I was on there by myself. So I took my phone out, and I put it under the table, and I texted my agent real quick. I was like, they want to know how much money we want. And he says, say this number. It was a big number, really big number. He says, say this number. He won't go for it. We'll start negotiating. We'll meet in the middle. I was like, okay, cool. So I said, well, Mr. Bruckheimer, I don't think we can be in business for anything less than blankety, blankety, blank. He didn't blink. He said, all right, let's sign it. I was like, oh, I should ask for more money. Oh, my God. I should have doubled that. And so we sold the rights to him for Razorblade Tears. And then All the Sin Bleeds come out, and HBO and Netflix both wanted it. So had a meeting with HBO, and they come there with all their executives and stuff. And then they brought an African-American actor, because the lead is an African-American character. And they was like, we want this person to play the role. And this guy, he had read the book. He was the only person in the room that had read the book. Because everybody else, the main character in All Sinners Bleed, his name is Titus. They kept calling him Travis. Yeah, and I corrected him the first time, and they kept saying it. And the brother that was on there, he was like, look, after the meeting, he messaged me. He's like, look, I know you didn't like what they were saying, but I want to play this role. Let me know what you do. And I dodged a bullet with that, because that was Jonathan Majors. Yeah. So then I go to talk to the people at Netflix. They knew the book. They had read the book backwards and forwards. They knew everything about it. And then we were finishing the meeting. They dropped their whole card. It was like, oh, and by the way, if you sign with us, we'll get Steven Spielberg to produce it from Annual Entertainment. And then we'll get Higher Ground Productions to produce it, which is the Obama's production company. And I said to my wife, I said, my mama will come out of her grave if I don't go with Higher Ground Production, as much as she loved President Obama. And so we signed with them for that. And he sent me another note. So I have 2 notes from the president. And I can't read his handwriting, though. So I don't know what he's saying. I assume it's nice. It's a beautiful envelope. It's like this gold embossed thing. But when you open it, it looks like an EKG. I don't know what it is. And so, But I got it framed, so somebody can come decipher it. And so finally, my wife and I, we had bought a sensible car, real sensible car, SUV. And when we signed that deal for the President Obama's book, for them to do the TV show on Netflix, I told her, I said, I want to buy another car, right? And she said, what do you want? What do you want to get? I said, I don't want to get something sensible. I want to get something fun. And she's like, all right, so let's go to the car dealership. So we go to the car dealership, and guy says, sir, what are you interested in? I said, you see that black Dodge Challenger out there, that 2022 Dodge Challenger? I said, I want that. He's like, okay, well, we have a lot of payment options and stuff. And I said, well, how much is it? So he told me how much it is. I said, I'll be right back. And I know he thought we weren't coming back. He thought he wasn't going to see us again ever. So we go down to the bank, get a cashier's check. We come back. I give him the check. And he looked at it. He said, all right, well, let's sign you up. And so we bought the car. We drove off the lot. And we pull in the driveway of our house. My wife, she gets out. She goes inside. And I'm sitting in the car. And she comes back. And I'm crying. And she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I can't believe my words did this. All these years I've been writing for so long. I've been struggling for so long. We were so poor growing up. My mom couldn't work. My dad and her didn't get along. And, we didn't have no plumbing until I was 16, And I remember one winter, we were so hungry. My grandfather, he went and made rabbit traps so we could catch rabbits. And I went to help him get the traps. And any of y'all that ever hunted a fish, the worst sound in the world is a rabbit in a trap. It's the most terrible thing. It sounds like a baby crying in the dark. And I remember I was so upset. And my grandfather, he was like, we either kill these rabbits or we starve. We ain't got nothing to eat. And to come from that to now be in a place where the president knows my name, Walter Mosley calls me on the regular. I've met famous people that I saw on television, people I admired, to know that I have come from that, it is nothing but a blessing, It's nothing but a blessing. I am so lucky to be here talking with you today. I'm so lucky to get to do this for a living, I've had a lot of different jobs. I've been bad at all of them. It's like, writing is the only one that I've been good at. Writing is the one thing that I think I'm good at. My mother used to tell me when I would get down about writing, she would say, birds got to fly, bees got to sting, you got to write. That's your thing. That's what you got to do. And I am so, so profoundly grateful to all of you, to anybody who reads my books, anybody who puts their hard-earned money down to take one of my books and read it, or go to a library, or if you just found it on the bus stop and you read it and you enjoy it, it is the greatest honor of my life to be able to do that for you. I really mean that. I would write today even if people didn't pay me, but being paid is real better. It's real better. Trust me, it's great. So I get that car, and I go get my daddy, because my daddy used to have a fast car. My daddy used to have a 71 Plymouth Duster. And when me and my brother were little boys, he would put $10 or $5 on the dashboard. And before he would take off, he would say, if you can reach it, you can have it. And he would take off, and them G-force would throw us back, and we could never reach it. And so I went to get him. And he's coming out to the door of his house. He lives in a little trailer, too. And he said, what you got there, boy? I said, come on, let's go for a ride. And he says, nah, I ain't getting in there with you. And I said, well, hey, come on. He said, and then my dad, because me and my dad, we didn't get along for some years. My mom and him separated. And I remember him saying to me, he said, you work for that. I don't deserve to get in there with you. And I said, man, if you don't get this damn car, because I love him. He's my daddy, And being able to share that with him, being able to share what I could share with my mother, being able to share this life with my wife, being able to share my words with you all, it's the best feeling ever. It really is. Somebody asked me one time, what would you do if all this stopped tomorrow? I would still be happy, because you can't take these last few years from me. You can't take this from me. This is an accomplishment. These books, the books I hope to write, these are things that I will carry with me the rest of my life. So I want to thank all of you for being here, for allowing me to ramble on and tell you a little bit about my life. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, and we'll take questions from the audience if you like. But thank y'all so much. I appreciate it. Just raise your hand if you got a question. You can ask me anything. Yes, ma'am. She got one right here. Thank you. Oh, I write on computer. That was her question. How do I write? I write on computer. My handwriting is terrible. Really, it's awful. It looks like hieroglyphics. So I can't read it myself sometimes. You know the worst thing in the world? I've had ideas for stories in the middle of the night, and I'll wake up and write them down. Then I can't read them next morning. I don't know what they are. So, but no, I write on computer. I usually will start writing the idea that I come up with and kind of what I want to do. Not really a story, just kind of, I want to tell a story about this sheriff in a small town, and what does that mean? And like, what's the story? And then what are the subjects I'm trying to talk about under the story? So like, I'm talking about that, like All Sinners Bleed is a mystery, but under that I'm talking about racism and religion and all that. So I'll write myself a little note on the computer, and then I'll start writing. Usually takes me about a year, 9 months to a year to finish a book. Once I finish, I have like 4 or 5 really good friends that I trust. My wife don't read my books because they're too violent for her. So, but she's an undertaker. She's a mortician. So I ask her stuff that I can use in the books, So, I'll wake her up in the middle of the night. Hey. So I had somebody hit somebody in the head with a hammer. What did that look like? And then she'd be like, I'm so tired. Like, please, can we talk about this in the morning? No, tell me right now. But then once my friends read it, I'll take it back. I'll go over it with some notes, and I'll send it to my editor. And then she'll send me back her notes, and then we'll kind of meet in the middle with that. And then after that, we send it on to the publisher, and they print it up. I will tell you this. You got a little pull at a publisher, because the first cover for All the Sinners Bleed, I didn't like it. And I was telling my wife about it, and she was like, well, you should tell him you don't like it. And I was like, I don't want to make no waves. She's like, no, tell him, because I'm not going to live with you with this book if you don't like the cover. And so I called them. I said, hey, you think we could maybe take another run at the cover? And they were like, oh, yeah, of course. I'm like, I did not know I had that kind of pull. I should have said something earlier. And so, but thank you for that question. Anybody else? Just raise your hand. Yes, sir.
Hi. How involved are you with the screenwriting process for your books?
So how involved am I with the screenwriting process? So the first book they optioned, they didn't involve me at all. Like, it was like, we just take the book. The more popular your books get, the more say you have in the screenwriting. So with Razor Blade Tears, I've met the directors who are doing it. It's a directing duo. I've been to Los Angeles to meet them and talk about the script and the screenplay. They sent me the screenplay and sort of asked my notes and my input. It's a really good screenplay. Those two guys are really good directors. They won an Oscar for short film a few years ago. They made a short film called Between Two Distant Strangers. And they won an Academy Award. I got to hold the Academy Award in the office. It's heavy as hell, too. Oh, my God. It's like a 20-pound weight. It's like you were doing curls. But they're an incredible directing duo, so I have a lot of confidence in them. With All the Sinners Bleed, I am one of the executive producers for the TV show on Netflix, so I get to approve the scripts. I'm going to write one of the scripts. I'm going to write the finale. It's going to be an 8-episode audio drama. So for All the Sinners Bleed, I'm involved with like the casting and everything. Razor Blade Tears, I'm not involved in that aspect of it, but they told me who they want to be some of the actors and stuff. Do y'all want to know? So for Razor Blade Tears, for the white father, they want Matthew McConaughey. And for the black father, they want Idris Elba. And my wife has generously offered to be his linguistic coach so he can get a southern accent. Because if y'all watch Daddy's Little Girls, he's slipping in and out of that accent. So that's the only thing we got to fix. So, and we got time for a couple more questions. We'll do more than one. Anybody else? Yes, sir, in the yellow.
Hello.
Hey.
Firstly, I'm Javion Banks. Nice to meet you, S.A. Cosby.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to VSU. I'm a biomajor sophomore from Roanoke, Virginia Western. And my question for you today is, how would you encourage more young black people to write their more own stories and to be able to tell their stories?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. The thing that I have learned as a black man writing and publishing is there's a story that only you can tell because only you have lived that experience. And it's funny, when I talked about those rejections, some of the rejections would tell me, well, we don't think our readers can relate to this character. We don't think our readers can relate to this main character. I also got told that black people don't read about black people in the South. Yeah, somebody said that to me, and I was like, well, I don't think Alice Haley and Ernest J. Gaines and Alice Walker know that, but I guess that's what y'all think. But no, I think for me, when people say that to me, it's like, but I grew up reading Raymond Chandler, and I relate to Philip Marlowe. I grew up reading Mike Hammer books, and I related to him, so why can't people relate to me? I think the thing that you have to do as a person of color, as a writer, is you have to be a little bit arrogant. You have to think that what you have to say is unique enough and special enough that people have to hear it. Because writing is a tough business. It is a hard business. Those rejections hurt, you know? When you're an actor and you get rejected, well, you can say, well, I had a bad script. You know, if you're a musician and you don't get an audition, you say, well, it's a bad piece of music. When you write and they reject it, they're rejecting you, you know? They don't know how long you worked on that book. They don't know how many hours you stayed up late at night trying to come up with a clever phrase, an interesting sentence, a really engaging character. Black people, people of color, we don't get as many bites of the apple in publishing, you know? There's a white writer right now, and his name is A.J. Finn. And he has gotten in so much trouble, and they keep giving him chances. He's gotten 4 and 5, 6 strikes. We don't get that. We don't. You have one flop, and they will drop you like a hot potato. And so when you get a chance to get on that stage, get on that in that publishing world, you make sure that they compensate you the way you should be compensated, and you make sure they respect you the way you should be respected. And when they tell you that somebody can't relate to your stories, you tell them the people that you grew up with can relate to those stories. The people you know can relate to those stories. And the only way we move forward as a people, black and white, is if people are able to talk to each other. That's what books are. Books are a conversation you have with a reader, so people can understand where you come from and who you are. And it's not easy. It really isn't. I've seen people, frankly, who aren't as talented as I am, get more money than I get. And I've seen people who don't work as hard, get more chance than I get. But somebody told me this, and I always believe it. Hustle will outdo privilege when privilege don't work hard. And so that's what I say to young black people. We had another question. I saw somebody's hand. Yes, sir. Young man right there. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hey.
So I'm in the last 40% of finishing my first book.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to talk to yourself as you were at that stage in your first book, what's the best piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Just if you're enjoying the story that you're writing right now, don't think about, well, is this going to be marketable? Don't think about, well, who's going to read it? What's the reviews going to say? You'll psych yourself out, and I did that. I did. I almost scrapped All the Sinners Bleed because it wasn't going well, and I had a friend of mine, and I called him, and I was talking to him about it, and I said, you know, Raised by Tears was so successful, I put so much pressure on myself, you know? I was like, this book got to be as big as Raised by Tears. It's got to be as big as that book. It's got to do everything that book did. And he gave me the best piece of advice. He said, look, man, it ain't got to be as good as Raised by Tears. It just got to be good. And that's all you got to do. All you got to do is tell a good story. At the end of the day, if you have given everything you can to that book, you know, and you've told the story to the best of your ability, then you let the chips fall where they may. Don't overthink it. Don't psych yourself out, because the story that you're telling is unique to your experiences. Nobody else can write that book that you've written. You're the only one that can finish it, and you can't fix it till you finish it. So whatever the problems you may think that book has, you can't fix a blank page. So finish it, then you can go back. It's like sculpting. You know, you get a rough rock. You know, it's not the final form. You chip on it, you work on it, you polish it, you keep working on it, and then when you finish, you have that finished product, and it's as good as you can do it, you know? And so I tell people all the time, don't give up, you know, and it's easy to give up. It's easy to say, well, I don't have time, or I can't do that today, I'm not gonna write tonight. I'm not gonna sit there and tell you that you gotta write every day. I'm not gonna sit there and tell you that you have any particular schedule that you gotta adhere to. All I'm gonna tell you is don't stop. don't give up. So that's the best piece of advice I could give you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's take one more question. Right up front, in the front row.
All right, I just wanted to ask, what advice would you give to aspiring writers? Because I myself, just like you, in college was told that, I'm talented and creative, and just last month I finished writing my first story, and I wanted to know the publishing process.
Yeah.
And, how and where to
Okay.
push your stories.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two ways you can do this. Some people have started publishing, self-publishing, which back in the day, I think people kind of look down and knows that, but there are people who have been very successful at self-publishing. The one thing I'll tell you about self-publishing is you have to do all the work. And what I mean is you have to write it, you have to promote it, you have to design the cover, you have to make calls to bookstores to try to get it in bookstores. You have to go to these events on your own. If you are going the what they call traditional publishing route, most times you're gonna try to get an agent. Here's the thing I'll tell you about getting an agent. Do your research on the agents. So whatever book you're writing, try to see if there are agents who have published books similar to that, books that are in the same sort of church, maybe a different pew, because you'll save yourself some time. There's no use if you've written a general literature book, send it to an agent that reps horror writers. Or if you've written a horror novel, you send it to an agent that only reps general literature writers. So you want to, you don't want to waste time going back for somebody who really isn't going to be able to represent the book as well as it should be represented. So do the research on the agents that you're going to send it to. Also, send a wide net. There are some agents who will tell you, well, if you send it to me, don't send it to nobody else. Forget that. You know what I'm saying? They'll hold you on a string for 3-4 months, and then you waiting for them. You send it to as many people as you feel comfortable with, as you feel are going to accept that book and maybe represent it the way it should be represented. Also, don't ever, ever, ever let an agent tell you that you have to pay them money. Money always flows to the artist. Money always comes to the writer. You don't pay anybody anything. That's one thing I would drill that in your head. The last thing I'll say is, if you do get a rejection from an agent, or you do get rejection at all, don't let that stop you. Don't let that push you down. With stories, there are a lot of markets now for short stories, a lot of online places. There are not as many print magazines that there used to be, but you can go online and Google places to sell stories. There are a lot of places that will actually pay you for your stories. Some places won't. Some places will publish a story and they'll tell you they're just selling, they're paying you in exposure. That's a personal choice. For me, exposure don't pay bills. So there are places that pay. Again, with that also, don't let rejection be the final decision. Don't let that be the door that closes you to writing. Just because what one person don't like, another person will love. And so what somebody think is yucky, somebody think is yummy. And so don't let that deter you. The last thing I'll tell you is, when it comes to the business end, if you decide one day to write a novel, right? Don't accept the first deal you get, accept the best deal you get. Not having a deal is better than having a bad deal. I have a friend right now who took a deal with a publishing house. Those publishers went out of business, and she can't find them. They haven't paid her, and her book is lost in the ether. So don't take the first deal, take your best deal. But I know it's tempting because you want to get published. You want to see your name out there. But it's worse to have a bad deal than have no deal at all. So thank you for that question. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody else got one? We got one more right here. This young lady down front. That'll be the last one, I guess.
It's not a question, it's a statement. I'm here with my sister book club. I just want to say you are so real and humble, and I just hope that you continue to stay that way, because it will reflect in your writing, and people will grasp that book, because you're so real.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I can't get arrogant. My head already too big. So plus, I think my mama was reached down out of heaven and smacked me upside my head if I start thinking too much of myself. Oh, I wear this because it's comfortable. I'll tell you what, I posted a picture today on Facebook. It's a picture of me, it's my cousin's birthday today, so it's a picture of me and him as little kids. I'm wearing flannel on that picture when I'm 11. I've been liking this. This ain't a new affectation for me. I've been liking this for a minute. But no, I wanted to address that. I think, it's funny. I have friends back home. Most of them love me. Most of them are proud of me. The two fellows that were in our wedding, my two best friends in the world, they love me to death. My brother goes to the barbershop and brags on me every couple weeks. which I told him one day, that dude's gonna mess your head up. Because the barber, so our barber, his cousin was in the NBA for like a minute. And he used to tell everybody that all the time. My brother goes in there every couple of weeks. What your cousin doing? What you doing now? My brother was on Today Show. He was on Tonight Show. What your cousin doing now? He was on Daily Show. Did you see it? And I'm like, he is going to jack your lineup up. You going to come out there looking like a geometry project. And so, but no, here's the thing. I don't take myself seriously at all. I really don't. I just like telling stories. I'm a writer. I take the writing seriously. I take the book seriously. Because I come from like a very blue-collar background. I come from a background where we worked hard, you know. My uncles and my brother and my dad, I watched them work hard for their money. So if you pick up one of my books, I want it to be worth your time. I want it to be worth your money. I don't ever phone it in, you know. If you read one of my books, you're guaranteed to know I worked my butt off to write it, and I want you to enjoy it because money is not easy to come by. And so I don't think a lot of myself. I'll tell y'all this real funny story. So I don't understand sometimes how well my books have done. So when I get invited to stuff, I don't know how big a deal it is when I go. So I got invited to the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., and my wife couldn't go, and she said, so I took the train up there, right? And she said, did you pack your blazer? I said, no, I'm just going to wear my flannel. She said, get a blazer, because you're going to be there. It's the National Book Festival. I said, yeah, but they probably got me in some room in the back. I ain't nobody. And she's like, go find a blazer. Go somewhere and get a blazer. You're going to need it. I said, fine, woman, golly. So I go get a blazer. I go to the thing. I walk over from the hotel, because they put me up in the hotel. So I walk up in the hotel, and I'm looking at the directions, and I get there, and I realize, oh, this is the Washington, D.C. Convention Center. This big as hell. And so I go in, and it's so many people. And one of the volunteers sees me, and they're like, Mr. Cosby, oh, yes, let's take you to the green room. I'm like, oh, that's a big deal. Oh, wow. So I get to the green room, and I'm eating my little sandwich and stuff and everything, and then they said, all right, you're going to go on in 20 minutes. All right, cool. They said, you want anything? You want some water? I said, no, I'm good. I got my sandwich, whatever. And they said, are there any writers you want to meet? And I said, oh, no, I don't want to bother nobody. I mean, Jesmyn Ward is here. I said, I'd like to meet her, but I don't want to bother. Don't bother. So she was like, okay. And then like 5 minutes later, she comes over, Jesmyn Ward comes over, taps me on the shoulder. She's like, somebody said you wanted to meet me. And I was so blown away. I couldn't talk. I was like, it was like I just learned English. And so, because she's talking to me, she said, I've read Raise My Tears. That's a really good book. And I said, uh-huh. And I was like, and so she's like, I'm going to come to your panel. Don't do that. I was like, and she's like, no, I'm coming. I want to hear you talk. And I'm like, all right. And I go to the panel room, and I go in, and it's a room bigger than this. It's a huge room. There's a bunch of people in there. I was like, oh, are they here for the previous panel? And the lady was like, no, they're here for you. And I'm like, oh, gosh, Jesus, I'm glad I got a coat. And so and that was one of the times I told my wife about it, and she's like, yeah, people read your books. You're kind of a big deal. I said, I'm not a big deal, whatever. So last thing I'll say, then we'll go do the book signing. So a couple weeks after that, there's a comedy show in D.C. There's a comedian named Patton Oswalt. I'm a big fan of his, right? And he's a pretty famous comedian. He was on King of Queens and stuff. And we're sitting in the audience, and the show was about to start. And my wife nudged me. She's like, hey, you should tag him and let him know you're here. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not clout chasing. She's like, didn't he say something about one of your books a couple weeks ago? I was like, yeah, but I don't want to bother that man, leave him alone. She said, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I tagged him in a tweet. I said, hey, I'm at the Patton Oswalt show, whatever. 5 minutes later, he messaged me. He said, you want to come backstage after the show? Yeah. And he was like, who's with you? Who you got with you? And I blanked out on my wife's name. I was like, it's me and my wife. And he's like, and her name? What's her name? I'm going to put it on the list. I said, it's my wife. I just typed it. So we go to the door, and the security guard's there. He's like, yes. I said, S.A. Cosby and wife are here. And she's like, my name is Kim. And so we go in, and I went to shake his hand. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Oswalt. He said, no, Mr. Miles. I'm Patton. Come on. It's good to meet you, man. Give me a hug. I'm like, oh, shoot. All right. So his father's there, because he's originally from Sterling, Virginia. And so his dad is there. I'll never forget this. He said, let me introduce you to my father. So he turns to his father. He said, Dad, I want you to meet S.A. Cosby. He's a great American novelist. Me, my big head. And I remember thinking, I said, so this is what it feels like when you make it, you know? And I remember thinking of my mom, you know, when I was a little boy, telling her I wanted to be a writer and stuff. And she used to tell me, she said, well, you know, I want you to try to do that. That's what you want to do. She's like, you know, make sure you take care of home, make sure you got your bills paid and stuff like that. She said, but one day, she said, I think people are going to know your name. So, you know, act accordingly. She said, treat people nice, be kind. Don't think too much of yourself, but also don't think too little of yourself. And that's a message that I've taken from her everywhere I go. I've been lucky enough to go across the world. I was in France last week. I just got back from LA. I've been to Amsterdam. I've been to London. All these places around the world, you know, places I never thought I would go. I mean, you know, like I said, when I tell you we grew up poor, right? I remember we used to go, I swear to God, the last thing I'll say, we used to go and get that, so my mom would go down to the social service department and get the free box of cheese and stuff like that. And we would come back, and I remember my brother, we would try to cook the cheese ourselves. Anybody ever had that cheese? Yeah, you got to start cooking on Tuesday if you want a sandwich by Thursday. And so, and I remember like all those times growing up. My brother, he's older than me, and how it used to be so cold in our house. He would get up early in the morning before we go to school, and he would get my mom would get glazed donuts. He would heat them up so we could have them in our hands to keep warm, you know. And I remember my grandmother had a wood stove. We didn't have indoor heat, and so we used to have chopped wood and stuff like that. And then I'm standing in this dressing room with this Patton Oswalt. This guy's been on TV. President Barack Obama knows my name. If you don't take anything else from what I've said today, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. I didn't have indoor plumbing until I was 16. I used to have to wear my brother's shoes. You know, we didn't have a lot of food because my mom couldn't work. You know, my mom was ill. My dad and my mom didn't always get along. I never thought this would be possible. I never thought things like this would happen. I always knew I would publish a book, though. I knew I would. I didn't know what would happen with it. I didn't know who would read it. I didn't know if it would be successful. I didn't know if people would like it. I knew I would do it because I was too stubborn not to. But I never knew any of this would happen. So if you don't take anything else from this, if you're an aspiring writer, believe me when I tell you, the world is a magical place. Nothing's impossible. You can do it. And if somebody tells you you can't, they're just trying to hold you down, you know? It's always somebody telling you you can't. It's always a hater trying to tell you you can't do this, you can't do that, you know? Let your haters be your motivators, you know what I'm saying? And it's so like, I'll leave you with this. There's an English writer named Alan Moore. He writes comic books. And he says, I hope young writers don't just think of themselves as entertainers. Everybody you know knows somebody who's read a book that changed their life. And when you write a book, you become a part of this long lineage, this legacy of people that stretches back to when they wrote the Gospels, all the way down to the books we're writing today. Books change people's lives. Books can change the world. And when you begin to write a book, you become a part of that. All storytellers we're the myth makers. And all a myth is the way a society sees itself or the way a society wants to see itself. And you're a part of that when you write a story. Take that seriously. It means something. What we do as writers is important. And if everybody could do it, everybody would do it. Don't sell yourself short. Thank you so much.